My name is Evelyn Glover, and I am 36 years old. Today I buried my mother. The room smelled like lilies and dust. I sat in the front row because there was nowhere else for a daughter to sit, hands folded in my lap like I might hold still the whole world just by refusing to move. People filed past in dark suits and borrowed black dresses, handing me their sympathy, as if it were a folded card that could be put away in a drawer. I nodded, I thanked. I remembered none of their names. None of. Beside me, Noah Bennett, my boyfriend of 2 years, pressed a steady palm against my back. To anyone watching, Noah was the portrait of compassion, jaw set, eyes damp, the kind of grief-adjacent man who looks good in quiet rooms. I wanted to believe his touch was a harbor. I almost did. Then his phone lit up. The screen was half tucked beneath the hem of his black blazer, just enough for me to catch the first line that reeled across the glass. A contact name, Rhea Calder. My stomach recognized the name before my brain did. There is a particular cold that begins behind the breastbone where a child keeps the last warm memory of her mother and spreads outward until even your fingertips know winter. Noah's thumb started moving, fast. He angled the phone away like a schoolboy hiding the answer key, forgetting I have spent a lifetime reading faces, reflections in windows, the truth in silence. He believed I was too lost in grief to notice. He believed incorrectly. A gray bubble, she's at her mother's funeral. Another, the house is ours. I stared at the casket. My mother's portrait watched back from an easel draped in white roses. I did not gasp. I did not cry. There is a place beyond the last tear where everything becomes surgical. The blade is clean there. I leaned in toward Noah until my shoulder brushed his. I forgot something at the house, I whispered. I heard my own voice, as if it belonged to someone recording lines for a different life. I will be right back. He blinked, arranging concern on his features with practiced care. Do you want me to come with you, Evelyn? No, I said gently. I need a minute alone. I used my handkerchief like a curtain call, rose, and moved through the rows. My aunt touched my elbow. I told her nothing with a small smile. Outside the air was bright and indecent. The sky should have dimmed for her. It did not. I did not drive home. I drove to the superstore with the blue sign and the fluorescent lights that make everyone look a little less human. In aisle 18, a clerk in a name tag asked if I needed help. Locks, I said, the kind that do not remember old promises. He laughed like I made a joke. I did not. I put in my cart one smart deadbolt with a camera and no keyhole, one garage hub that resets remotes and erases old codes, a boxed security kit, base station door sensors, window sensors, motion detectors, 2, 105 decibel external sirens, 3 red and white, no trespassing violators, will be prosecuted signs, a handful of heavy zip ties, and a spare battery because grief has taught me what fails when power dies. At checkout, the cashier told me to have a better day. I thought about telling her my mother will not have any more days. I nodded instead. The house was quieter than the funeral home. Grief has a sound you hear most in empty rooms. In the living room, my mother's unfinished painting still leaned on the easel. Her last hillside mid-stroke sky, only hinted at in charcoal arcs. I took a clean sheet and draped it over as if tucking in a child. I will be right back. I told the painting the way she used to tell me before stepping into another room. I am methodical when I am angry. Old hardware came off first. The deadbolt sighed out of the door like it had been waiting for permission. New smart lock in, mount flush, screws set, firmware update. I chose a 10-digit master code I have never spoken aloud. I synced the garage hub, watched the old remotes die in my palm, and for the first time that day, exhaled. Sensors on front door backslider, garage, and the guest room window. Noah always cracked for air, the same window that faces the side fence. He promised he never jumped when he locked himself out last spring. Motion detectors in the foyer living room and the upstairs landing where boards creak a warning under bad decisions. I hid one siren in the HVAC return vent and another under the stairs where sound finds bone. I zip-tied the no trespassing signs to the front gate, the porch railing, and the fence that faces the neighbor's driveway, the one with the tidy hedge and the tidy gossip. I opened the new app, Armed Home. The screen glowed obediently. On my way back to the funeral home, I watched the world move like a stage set being pushed by silent crew. Noah was waiting, as if he had counted the minutes. You were gone forever, he said. Voice, soft eyes, searching my face for the map he wanted. Just needed air, I replied. We drove to the cemetery in his car. He asked if I wanted water. I told him yes. He fetched it, held the bottle, tipped it toward my mouth. I thought of hands and leashes and levers. At the graveside, I watched the ropes give the casket lower. The green straps pull taut, and imagined the sound a house makes when it closes and what leaves with it. We returned close to dusk. From the curb, Noah noticed the signs first. He stopped with a small laugh. "Did someone threaten you?" "Just being careful," I said. "New system." He went up the steps ahead of me, already annoyed. He pulled his old key from his pocket, flipped it uselessly in the air, and frowned when he saw there was nowhere left to put it. "What is this?" He pointed at the keyless face. "Evelyn." "Why would you—" "Try the code," I said, as if we were a team. He tapped the old numbers. "Access denied." He tried again slower. "Access denied." "Use the backslider," I told him, my voice as calm as glass water. Maybe that sensor did not pair right. He huffed and cut around the side path past the hydrangeas my mother planted, the ones that turn blue, only when the soil is right. I followed at a distance that felt like truth. Noah yanked the handle. The door moved. Beep, beep, beep. The 30-second entry delay began counting down like a thin, polite fuse. "What is that beeping?" he called, irritation drifting into fear. "Put in the code, Evelyn." "You have 20 seconds, I said. "You told Rhea the house is yours. People usually know the codes to their houses." He turned the confusion landing first, then the recognition, then the anger. "What did you do?" 15. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, voice pitching up for the neighbor's kitchen window. "Open the door." 10. "I live here," he shouted. "You cannot." The sirens detonated. Sound became a wall. He stumbled, hands clamped to his ears. Somewhere a dog barked and then gave up. The no trespassing sign beside his knee looked almost decorative, like a bow on a gift you should not open. My phone rang, inside my palm. Security monitoring service. I answered and raised my voice over the noise. "Yes, there is an unauthorized person on my back patio. His name is Noah Bennett. Please dispatch police." Noah saw my mouth form the words. He reeled forward, shouting something I could not hear. I pressed disarm. Silence returned like a slap. The quiet after an alarm is not peace, it is a ledger. Noah's eyes were wet and furious. "What are you doing?" Standing in my house, I said evenly and applying the kind of boundary that actually works. "You cannot call the police on me," he hissed. "I get mail here, my driver's license." "Then you will have your time to pack a bag," I replied, already hearing the distant rhythm of sirens that meant Officer Breyer and Officer Kim would soon pull to the curb with their tired wisdom about tenancy. "But you will not have my code." He tried my name as a plea. "Evelyn." I looked past him through the glass into my mother's living room, where her unfinished sky slept beneath a clean white sheet. When the cruisers turned onto our street, the hydrangeas trembled in the wash of blue light. I squared my shoulders and waited to say calmly and clearly what belonged to me. Here, I told myself, is where the house closes. The police lights painted the neighborhood in flashes of red and blue, and for the first time since my mother's funeral, I felt something other than grief or anger. I felt clarity. Cold, precise clarity. Officer Karen Breyer, tall and tired-looking, stepped out first. Her partner, Officer Daniel Kim, followed behind, her notebook already in hand. They exchanged a brief glance at the no trespassing sign zip-tied across my porch railings before turning to me. "Evening, ma'am," Breyer began. "We got a call about a possible break-in." I gestured toward Noah, who was still standing in the backyard, his face pale with a blend of panic and fury. "That's him." He tried to enter without permission. He jumped in immediately. "I live here. She locked me out while I was at her mother's funeral." "Officer, please, she's not thinking straight. Her mom just died. She's having some kind of breakdown." The sympathy card, always the first move. Officer Kim looked between us. "Sir, do you have ID with this address?" Noah pulled his wallet from his jacket, his hands trembling just enough to look pitiful. "Driver's license. See mail, 2 bank statements. I've lived here for 2 years." Officer Breyer turned to me, calm but wary. "Ma'am, I understand you're the homeowner." I nodded. "Yes. The deed, mortgage, utilities, everything is in my name. He's been staying here as my boyfriend. But I just found out." I paused, opened my phone, and handed it to her. "He's been planning to move another woman into my home. This text was sent during my mother's funeral." Breyer read the message. Then she looked at Noah. "Mr. Bennett, this text reads, 'She's at her mother's funeral. The house is ours. Would you like to explain?'" Noah's mouth worked, but no words came out. Then, it was a joke. You're taking it out of context. I didn't mean. Breyer raised an eyebrow. Joke or not, that's pretty damning. Officer Kim sighed and scribbled something in his notepad. Ma'am, he said to me, I know this looks bad, but technically, since he's established residency, he receives mail. Here has ID with this address. You can't just change the locks and keep him out. It's considered a civil matter. You'll have to go through formal eviction channels. There it was, the squatter's shield. Legal residency, the thread that keeps leeches attached. I didn't flinch. I understand, officer. I'm not evicting him tonight. He can collect a few essentials under supervision, but I will not be staying in the house with him here. I will file a legal eviction in the morning. Breyer gave a small nod. That's a reasonable compromise. Noah's eyes lit up. He thought he'd won. Thank you, he said, turning to me with that falsely soothing tone I once thought meant safety. See, baby. They understand. We can talk about this like adults. Go upstairs, I told him flatly. Take your clothes, your laptop, your toiletries. You have 10 minutes. He laughed softly, disbelieving. 10 minutes. You're giving me a timer now. 10, I repeated. Starting now. Officer Kim gestured for him to go ahead, watching like a referee at a game no one wanted to play. As Noah disappeared up the staircase, the house filled with noise. Drawers slamming hangers. Clattering. Muttered curses that echoed down the hallway. Officer Breyer stood by the front door, arms crossed, eyes on me. You handled that calmly, she said quietly. I've had practice, I replied. You learn how to stay quiet when people mistake your silence for weakness. Breyer gave me the smallest smile. I've seen plenty of those. Upstairs, a loud thump. Then Noah's voice, strained and angry. You won't get away with this. Evelyn, I helped decorate this house. I paid for groceries, paint, hell. I even built that stupid bookshelf. I tilted my head toward the officers. Please note, I said evenly, that he's admitting his contributions. Officer Kim's mouth twitched. Duly noted. Noah stormed down the stairs, dragging a half-zipped suitcase. His once carefully gelled hair hung limp, now his funeral suit wrinkled. He jabbed a finger toward me. You're out of your mind. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. Then we'll both hear from them, I said, voice calm as a mirror. Good night, Noah. He hesitated at the door, maybe hoping I'd cave, that I'd plead with him the way I used to when I still believed he was good. But I didn't move. Officer Breyer opened the door for him. He stomped out, muttering, This isn't over. No, I murmured. It isn't. When the door shut, silence folded over us again. Officer Kim handed me a card. Get that eviction filed as soon as possible, ma'am. And maybe consider a restraining order if he keeps showing up. Thank you, I said, taking the card. They left. The blue lights faded down the street. I locked the door behind them, entered my new code, and listened to the soft click that meant safe. I walked through the house slowly. The air still smelled faintly of lilies from the funeral flowers I'd brought home, but under it something sharper, the scent of metal of wires and new beginnings. The faint glow of the security system blinked from green to steady blue, armed. I stood in front of my mother's covered painting fingertips, grazing the edge of the sheet. For a brief second, the ache in my chest eased. I whispered, It's just us now, Mom. Then my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. A familiar voice purred. Through the line, honey-sweet and venom-laced. Hi, Evelyn, it's Rhea. I think we should talk woman to woman. The sound of her voice, smooth, practiced predatory, made my stomach twist. You shouldn't have this number, I said quietly. Oh, Noah gave it to me ages ago. He's such a sharer, she giggled. Anyway, I just wanted to say, this whole thing is unnecessary. He's hurting. You're hurting. Maybe we can find a way to make it easier for everyone. I laughed low and sharp. You mean for you. She didn't deny it. He told me you changed the locks. That's not very fair considering he's been paying bills, helping around the house, putting in emotional labor. Emotional labor. I repeated, almost smiling. Is that what you call sending texts during someone's funeral? Her tone hardened. Careful, sweetheart. This can get messy. He'll be back for his things. Don't make it uglier than it has to be. The line went dead. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle, then opened my contacts and tapped a new number, Frank Lauer, attorney. He answered on the third ring, his voice low and direct. Evelyn, I'm sorry for your loss. What's going on? Frank, I said, steady now. I think it's time we start talking about eviction procedures and what to do when your ex decides your house is his. By morning, the house was silent again. The kind of silence that's heavy, not peaceful, but expectant, like the air before a storm breaks. I hadn't slept. My mother's painting still sat covered in the living room, and the coffee in my hand had gone cold twice. My phone was face down on the counter, but its presence buzzed in the back of my skull like an uninvited thought. When it finally rang, I already knew who it was. Noah. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call came from an unknown number. I answered. Evelyn, the voice was smooth, deliberate, familiar. Rhea called her. Hello, I said flatly. You really shouldn't ignore him, she said. Her tone honeyed but hard underneath. Noah's distraught. You kicked him out after a funeral. That's cruel, don't you think? I think cruelty looks different when you're the one at the window, I replied. She laughed a light, airy sound that didn't belong to a decent person. Look, he just wants to collect the rest of his things. And the car. You've made your point, Evelyn. But you don't want this to get legal. The word lingered like perfume. You mean you don't want him to lose, I said. I'll have my lawyer call yours. Her breath hitched just slightly. Oh, come on. Lawyers over what? A misunderstanding. You're still grieving. You're not thinking clearly. Maybe not, I said quietly, but my locks are. And I hung up. By noon, I was sitting in attorney Frank Lauer's office, a space that smelled faintly of espresso and paper. He was an older man, maybe in his late 40s, with silver at his temples, and the calm of someone who's seen enough people destroy themselves politely. He slid his glasses down and glanced at the document I'd handed him. You changed the locks before filing for eviction. Yes. He nodded, not disapproving, just thoughtful. Technically, that's premature, but considering this, he tapped the printed screenshot of Noah's text. She's at her mother's funeral. The house is ours. I can make a strong case for protective action. He leaned back. Tell me about the car. It's in my name, I said. I bought it for him. He was supposed to make payments. He stopped 6 months ago. Perfect, Frank said, making a note. Call the finance company and report it as unauthorized use. They'll file a repossession order within 24 hours. I blinked. You mean they'll take it? He smiled faintly. They'll retrieve their asset. You're protecting your credit. And your boundaries. Something in his tone made me feel steady for the first time in days. And his things? I'd suggest an emergency moving service, he said. Document everything. Box it, store it, label it. You're not destroying his property, you're securing it. That way, when he inevitably calls the police again, you have receipts, storage unit numbers, timestamps. He slid me his card. Evelyn, men like him and women like her rely on your exhaustion. Don't give them that. I nodded slowly. I won't. By sunset, my driveway was filled with movers in navy shirts labeled Express Pack and Store. They moved like a pit crew. Precise, efficient, emotionless. Every box that came down the stairs felt like a little more poison being drained from the house. They packed everything that was his, every shirt, every razor, every shoe, the framed print he hung over the bed that said, "Be bold, be kind, be you." I almost laughed when they wrapped the ridiculous lamp shaped like a hand giving a peace sign. Even the half-empty jar of his favorite hair pomade went into a labeled box, Bathroom Noah. By 2 a.m., the truck door slid shut. I watched them drive off toward a climate-controlled storage unit 2 towns over. I paid for 1 month in advance cash. And then, just as Frank predicted, came the second act. At 10 to 12 the next morning, my phone started vibrating nonstop. Calls, messages, voicemails like a swarm. First from Noah, then from Rhea, then from an unknown number that turned out to be Officer Breyer. I called her back. Ms. Glover. I'm at your property, she said, sounding weary. Mr. Bennett is here with Ms. Calder. He's claiming you've stolen his car and all of his personal belongings. Stolen, I repeated. The car's registered under my name. I reported it to the lender. It's been repossessed. As for his things, they're safe. Professionally packed, stored, and logged. I can provide the unit address access code and receipt. There was a pause. Storage unit, she repeated. Yes, I said simply. I didn't want anything to be damaged while we wait for the eviction hearing. On the other end of the line, I could faintly hear Noah shouting. She's lying. She's throwing everything out. Then Officer Breyer's voice again firmer now. Ma'am, he's very upset, but from what you're saying, this doesn't qualify as theft. No, I said, it qualifies as accountability. Another pause, then a soft exhale. You're smarter than most, Ms. Glover. I'll document this as resolved. Before hanging up, she added quietly, They won't stop here. Be ready. I already am, I replied. That afternoon, I sat on my porch, a mug of hot tea in hand. For the first time in weeks, I felt the breeze move through the trees instead of through me. The house was safe, quiet, mine again. Until another call came, this time from a blocked number. I answered. Evelyn Noah's voice said brittle, trembling with fury, and something else fear. You're ruining my life. I'm protecting mine, I said. You can't just erase me. Then stop writing yourself into my walls. He went silent. For a moment I could hear the sound of cars behind him, maybe parked outside my house again. We'll see about that, he muttered and hung up. That night, I sat in front of my mother's painting, finally pulling the sheet back. The unfinished landscape looked just as she left it, mid-stroke, a smear of pale blue sky, waiting to become something more. I traced the dry edge of her brushwork and whispered, "You'd tell me to let it go, wouldn't you?" In the quiet, I almost heard her answer, "No, Evelyn. Finish it." Not the painting, the story. 2 weeks later, an envelope landed in my mailbox. Thick, certified, legal. I knew before opening it, Noah had finally made good on his threat. Inside was a civil complaint plaintiffs Noah Bennett and Rhea Calder. Defendant Evelyn Glover. The list of accusations was absurd, almost theatrical. Illegal eviction, conversion of personal property, promissory estoppel, intentional infliction of emotional distress. They wanted $50,000 for emotional damages and the destruction of shared domestic contributions. Their lawyer even attached photos Rhea standing smugly in my living room next to her infamous peacock blue accent wall, pretending as if it were sacred art. I sat at my kitchen table, letter trembling in my hands, and laughed. Not because it was funny, but because grief, betrayal, and outrage had finally twisted together into something brittle enough to crack. That night I called Frank. He picked up on the second ring. "Evelyn, I got served." He exhaled sharply. "Of course you did. What's the claim?" I told him. He chuckled dryly. "Emotional distress. That's a new one. The only thing you distressed was their fantasy of ownership." "What do we do?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "We don't react. We respond. Calmly. With evidence." The next few days blurred into paperwork and strategy meetings. Frank's office became my temporary war room. Stacks of photos, receipts, call logs. The text from the funeral, police reports, repossession confirmation. Everything documented. "You've done half my work for me," Frank said one morning, flipping through a binder I'd assembled. "The eviction is already in process. The property was stored and cataloged. The car's repossession is legal. They're grasping." I nodded. "Then why does it still feel like they're winning?" He looked up, his gaze kind but unflinching. "Because harassment feels like momentum. It's noise. They're trying to exhaust you." They almost succeeded. That weekend, my aunt called in tears. "Evelyn, what's going on?" "Noah's mother called me. She said you destroyed your mother's painting in some fit of grief." I froze. "What?" "She said you burned it, that you were spiraling." I swallowed hard. "Aunt Lynn, I didn't. It's right here. Covered. Safe." "Can you prove it?" she whispered, her voice shaking. I switched to FaceTime, carried the phone to the living room, pulled back the sheet. "See?" She gasped softly. "Oh, thank God." I smiled weakly. "They're trying to break me." My aunt's eyes filled with pity. "Then don't let them." 3 nights later, just after midnight, there was a loud knock on my front door. 2 police officers stood under the porch light. The same look of weary sympathy I'd come to recognize. "Ms. Glover," one said gently, "we received a call. Someone reported that you might be suicidal." I felt the air leave my chest. "What?" He nodded. "They said you lost your mother recently, had a breakdown, and were destroying property." The humiliation burned hotter than anger. I stood there in my robe, my hands shaking, but not from fear, from rage. I stepped aside. "Come in," I said quietly. They hesitated, then entered. I walked them through the house. Everything was neat, organized, calm. My mother's painting rested peacefully on the easel. No destruction, no chaos, just silence, and a woman who'd run out of tears. After a few minutes, one officer muttered, "I'm sorry, ma'am. This seems like a false report." I nodded. "It's harassment. They're building a case." He sighed. "We'll make a note of it. You should file for a restraining order." "I will," I said, "and I'll make sure my lawyer gets their names." The next morning, Frank's voice was sharp on the phone. "That's enough," he said. "This isn't just harassment anymore. They're trying to establish a narrative unstable, irrational, emotionally unfit. Classic manipulation tactic before mediation." "So what do we do?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. We turned it around. 2 days later, Frank filed a motion for discovery. His argument was brilliant. He claimed that Noah and Rhea's entire case rested on the claim that they'd been destitute and emotionally damaged by my actions. Therefore, their financials and communications were relevant to the case, especially the context behind the phrase, "the house is ours." We requested subpoenas for Ria's bank records to determine financial dependence or shared assets with Noah. Noah's text messages call logs and email correspondence. Any joint accounts or shared payments for property or utilities. But Frank saved his sharpest move for last. He told me we're going to subpoena Ria directly for her financial ties and personal obligations. If she's funding the lawsuit, we have a right to know where that money's coming from. I frowned. Why does that matter? Frank smiled thinly. Because people who cheat and manipulate tend to hide one thing in common: money or secrets. If she's covering his legal fees, we'll expose it. If someone else is covering hers, we'll expose that too. I hesitated. Frank, you're enjoying this. He didn't deny it. Let's just say I've met a few Ria Calders before. They burn bright, but they always forget that fire leaves smoke. That night, I sat on the porch again, sipping tea, while the wind pushed through the hydrangeas. I could almost hear my mother's voice in the rustle. You're doing fine, Evie. Don't stop now. I looked back at the house, the lights warm the locks, secure the air, finally steady. And I whispered to no one but the dark. Let's see how they handle a little truth. The subpoena landed like a grenade. 3 days after Frank filed it, Ria's attorney called his office, shouting so loudly I could hear her voice through his speakerphone. You have no right to dig into her finances. This is harassment. Frank didn't even flinch. Your client is claiming destitution and emotional devastation, he said smoothly. If she's financially supported or supporting someone else, that's relevant. We're entitled to know. I sat across the table, sipping coffee, my heart steady for once. Watching my enemies panic from a distance was strangely quieting. Ria's attorney sputtered something about privacy, about irrelevance, about how dare we. Frank simply smiled and hung up. Watch, he said, turning to me. They'll fold soon. They always do. He was right. 2 days later, Frank got another call, this time polite, almost pleading. They wanted to settle. We're open to negotiation, their lawyer said. Noah and Ria are emotionally drained. They just want closure. Closure, Frank repeated, raising an eyebrow. That's lawyer code for panic. Tell them we'll meet, but in person. The conference room smelled like stale coffee and expensive resentment. Across from me sat Noah, pale and gaunt, wearing a wrinkled blazer and gilt like a second skin. Beside him, Ria, flawless as ever, every hair perfect, every expression rehearsed. But her eyes flickered, just a little. Frank placed a single manila folder on the table between us. We'll keep this short, he said. You wanted to talk settlement. Let's hear it. Ria's lawyer cleared her throat. My clients are prepared to drop their suit if Ms. Glover agrees to pay $25,000 and assume the outstanding car loan. Frank leaned back unbothered. Interesting offer. Here's ours. You drop the lawsuit with prejudice, sign a mutual non-disparagement agreement, and we won't send this folder to Mrs. Lang. Silence. Ria blinked. Who? Noah shifted his face, draining of color. Mrs. Lang, Frank repeated lightly. The legal wife of one Marcus Lang, a man who, according to bank transfers, has been financially supporting Ms. Calder for the past 8 months. The same account that paid the retainer for your lawyer. Ria's mouth opened, then closed. She turned sharply toward Noah. What is he talking about? Frank slid a photo from the folder, a screenshot of a joint account statement. Deposits labeled Lang Enterprises Payroll. One note reading, for Ria. Personal expenses. Noah stammered. Ria, don't what, she snapped. Don't find out you've been lying to me too. Frank folded his hands. Shall we call Mrs. Lang and explain how her husband's company funds your lawsuit? Or will you two simply sign the papers and walk away? Ria's attorney broke first. We'll sign. But Ria wasn't ready to surrender her performance. She turned to Noah, fury blooming under her perfect foundation. You dragged me into this mess. You told me she'd break down, that we'd win that. Enough, Noah barked, slamming his hand on the table. You used me too, Ria. Frank and I exchanged a glance, silent spectators to the implosion. You think I didn't know you were married, Noah hissed. You said your husband was separated. My husband pays for everything, she screamed. That's more than you ever did. The room went still. Then Frank, calm as ever, pushed the papers toward them. Sign, or I'll file the subpoena publicly by morning. Ria's pen trembled as she scribbled her name. Noah followed his jaw, locked his signature jagged and angry. When it was done, Frank gathered the papers, slipped them neatly into his briefcase, and said, Pleasure doing business. We stood to leave. As we reached the door, Ria's voice sliced through the air. This isn't over, Evelyn. I turned back slowly. No, Ria. It is. You just don't know what silence feels like yet. Outside in the crisp air, Frank exhaled deeply. And that, he said, is how you end a storm without raising your voice. I smiled faintly. You think they'll stay quiet? Oh, they'll explode, he said. Just not at you. He was right again. A week later, I got the update through a mutual acquaintance. Ria had blown up her own life. In a fit of rage, she'd called Mrs. Lang, confessed everything her affair with Marcus, the lawsuit, the lies. She sent screenshots, emails, even photos. Mrs. Lang was not the forgiving type. Within 48 hours, Marcus Lang was facing divorce proceedings and an internal investigation at his firm. Noah's role didn't stay secret either. Once Mrs. Lang's lawyer traced payments between Marcus and Noah, yes, they'd shared transfers for legal fees. Noah's reputation tanked. His freelance business collapsed, his accounts frozen during the inquiry. I didn't gloat, not out loud, but when Frank called to tell me the peacock wall has finally fallen, I couldn't help but laugh. Sometimes karma doesn't knock politely. Sometimes it breaks the door down, sirens blazing. By the end of that month, the lawsuit was officially dismissed with prejudice. All claims withdrawn, all sides bound by confidentiality. But peace doesn't always arrive in silence. It hums beneath your skin like a long-held breath finally released. That night, I stood by the window looking at my mother's hydrangeas glowing faintly under the porch light. The blooms were fading, now pale and tired, but still standing. I whispered, "It's over." Then for the first time since the funeral, I slept through the night. 8 weeks after my mother's funeral, I woke to sunlight instead of sirens. The air felt different, lighter, calmer, as though the house itself had unclenched. For the first time in months, there was no knocking, no shouting, no letters from attorneys demanding apologies I didn't owe. Just morning light spilling across the floorboards my mother once polished herself. The legal case was officially closed, the settlement sealed. Noah and Ria had vanished. Vanished doesn't mean gone. It means forgotten by everyone who no longer needs their noise. Frank called that morning just to confirm the final paperwork. "It's done," he said, the sound of papers shuffling on his end. "All dismissed. With prejudice. They can't touch you again." "Thank you," I said quietly. He hesitated. "You know, Evelyn, most people crack halfway through a case like that. You didn't." "I did," I said. "Just not where anyone could see it." He chuckled softly. "That's strength, not silence." After we hung up, I walked to the living room and stood before my mother's painting, the one she never finished. For weeks, I hadn't been able to look at it without remembering that day, the casket, the phone screen, the words that burned the last of my naivety away. Now I pulled off the sheet. The canvas stared back at me, half sky, half shadow. Her brushstrokes ended mid-motion, as if she'd stepped out of the room and forgotten to return. I didn't cry, not this time. Instead, I sat in front of it with a cup of tea and let the quiet settle around me like a blanket. I could still hear her voice in memory, Evelyn. Nothing unfinished is wasted. It just means the story isn't over yet. Later that afternoon, the repo company emailed me the final paperwork. The car had been auctioned, the loan cleared in my name, and the balance settled. Noah's credit, however, was ruined. I wondered where he was now. Probably in some borrowed apartment with cheap blinds and echoing walls trying to charm his next savior. I didn't wish him misery. I just didn't wish him anything at all. As for Ria, word spread faster than either of them could contain. Her marriage to Marcus Lang was over. His wife's lawyers were sharks, and she was left stripped of everything apartment finance's reputation. I read a short online post one evening, a local gossip forum piece titled, "Exposed Mistress Now Living with Parents." No photo, no name. But I knew. I closed the browser, poured myself another glass of wine, and let the story end there. That night, I took out one of my mother's old brushes from the drawer. The handle was worn smooth from years of use. I dipped it into a small jar of cerulean paint and hesitated over the canvas. Then gently I drew a single line through the white sky she'd left empty, not to finish it, just to touch it. A promise, not an ending. Weeks turned into a new rhythm. I started going on morning walks again, through the park near the lake where my mother used to feed the ducks, past the little coffee shop that still played her favorite jazz station. The barista learned my name. "Morning, Ms. Glover," he'd say with an easy smile. The usual. I'd nod, "Please, extra hot." No one there knew the story. No one looked at me like I was fragile. I was just another woman buying coffee, carrying silence like peace instead of punishment. One evening, my Aunt Leon visited. She stood in the doorway, her eyes tracing the now serene house. "It feels lighter," she said, "like the walls can breathe again." I smiled. "So can I." She set down a bouquet of lilies on the table, my mother's favorite, and reached for my hand. She'd be proud, you know. I looked at the painting behind her, the unfinished sky glowing faintly in the dim light. "I hope so," I whispered. You didn't destroy her memory, Evelyn, my aunt said. You protected it, and yourself. After she left, I sat by the window and watched the hydrangeas sway in the night breeze. They'd turned pale this season, almost white. My mother used to say they change color depending on the soil, too acidic, too blue, too sweet, too pink. Maybe healing is like that. You change colors depending on what you've survived. The next morning, I wrote something in my journal for the first time since the funeral. Love without self-respect isn't love. Grief without boundaries is ruin. And peace isn't given. It's built. I closed the notebook, stood, and opened every window in the house. Fresh air rolled in, carrying faint scents of earth and rain. The alarm light blinked steady on the wall, blue, safe, constant. For once, the house didn't feel like a fortress. It felt like home. I whispered one last